Chapter 3. Watchpoint Gibraltar. The transport aircraft that carried Company 8 from London to Gibraltar flew low over the Mediterranean, giving Shinra his first glimpse of the legendary fortress that had been Overwatch's heart for decades. Even from the air, Watchpoint Gibraltar was imposing, a massive complex built into and onto the Rock of Gibraltar itself. Part ancient fortress, part modern military installation, part symbol of hope for a broken world. The rock rose from the sea like a titan's fist, its limestone cliffs sheer and unforgiving. But where nature had created a defensible position, human engineering had transformed it into something extraordinary. Buildings clung to the rock face like barnacles, connected by bridges and tunnels. Radar arrays and communications equipment crowned the summit.
Landing pads jutted out at impossible angles, held up by supports that seemed too slender for the weight they bore. The whole complex looked like it had been designed by someone who believed gravity was negotiable. Magnificent! Arthur breathed from his seat beside Shinra. The knight's eyes were practically glowing with excitement. Do you know the history of this place? Gibraltar was one of Overwatch's first major installations. Reinhardt himself helped design the defensive systems. Winston, the scientist gorilla, this has been his home for years, and the training facilities here are supposed to be the best in the world. You've been reading the orientation materials, Shinra observed, his manic grin spreading despite the lingering grief from London. It had been 2 days since Mondada's assassination. 2 days of debriefing and investigation and finding absolutely nothing useful about the White Angel. The change of scenery was welcome, even if the weight of failure still pressed on his chest like a physical thing. Of course I've been reading the orientation materials. Arthur looked scandalized at the suggestion he might not have. This is Gibraltar, Kusakabe. Warriors train here. Legends were made here. The least I can do is arrive informed about its history and significance. From across the transport's cabin, Tamaki made a small sound that might have been amusement or might have been anxiety. She'd been quieter than usual since London, her typical catastrophic mishaps subdued. Even her lucky Lecher syndrome seemed to have taken a break, as if the universe itself recognized that some moments were too heavy for comedy. Captain Obi sat near the cockpit, reviewing tactical data on his tablet, his cybernetic fingers moving with precise efficiency. Hinawa was disassembling and cleaning one of his rifles for approximately the 7th time since they'd boarded, his face impassive. Maki stared out a window, her expression thoughtful. And Iris sat in powered-down meditation, her optical sensors dimmed, processing the loss of Mondata in whatever way omnic consciousness processed grief. They'd lost, failed their mission, watched a man, a monk, a voice for peace die despite their best efforts. The fact that they'd prevented a panic stampede, that they'd saved thousands of other lives in the chaos that followed, didn't change the fundamental truth. They'd been tasked with protecting Mondata, and he was dead. The transport touched down on landing pad 7 with barely a tremor. The pilot was skilled, probably ex-military. The rear hatch hissed open, revealing Gibraltar's interior hangar bay and the welcome committee that waited there. 3 figures stood at attention as Company 8 disembarked. The first was a young woman who looked barely older than Shinra himself, maybe 22 or 23, with brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. But it was her equipment that drew the eye. She wore a full mech suit painted in pink and white with rabbit motifs, complete with a logo that read DVA in stylized lettering. The suit was smaller than Reinhardt's armor, more agile-looking, built for speed and precision rather than raw power. Light guns were mounted on both arms, and the whole thing hummed with barely contained energy. "Company 8, welcome to Watchpoint Gibraltar." Her voice was bright, energetic, with a slight Korean accent. "I'm Hana-song, DVA, and I'll be coordinating your training schedule for the next 2 weeks. I know you just came from a rough mission, so we're gonna ease you in. Maybe. Probably not. Actually, no, Winston's schedule is brutal. Sorry." Despite her words, her smile was genuine and somehow infectious. Shinra found himself grinning back automatically. The second figure stepped forward, a woman in full combat armor painted in blues and golds, her face hidden behind a helmet styled to evoke ancient Egyptian imagery. She moved with military precision, and even at rest, she projected an aura of disciplined lethality. Faraha Amari, call sign Farah, she introduced herself crisply. I handle aerial combat training and tactical assessment. My mother was Anna Amari, one of Overwatch's founding members. I'm told you performed well under pressure in London, despite the outcome. We'll build on that. Her tone was professional, but not unkind. Shinra appreciated that she acknowledged London without dwelling on it. No false comfort, no empty platitudes, just recognition that they'd done their jobs, even if the result wasn't what they'd wanted. The third figure was a man in his early 30s with dark skin and an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He wore combat medic gear, tactical vest over doctor's clothing, medical supplies mixed with ammunition pouches. But it was his expression that caught Shinra's attention. He looked at them with the particular understanding of someone who'd seen young soldiers before, who knew what they were carrying. Baptiste Augustin, he said, his Haitian accent warm and melodic. Combat medic, field surgeon, and the guy who'll patch you up when Diva's easing you in turns out to be a disaster. I also have some experience with Talon operations. Spent a few years working for them before I saw sense and left. So if you have questions about how they operate, how they think, I'm your resource. Talon. The name sent electricity through Shinra's nervous system. He forced himself to stay calm, to not immediately barrage Baptiste with questions about white-haired teenage snipers. There would be time for that. Right now, they needed to get through introductions. Captain Obi stepped forward, offering his cybernetic hand to each of the veteran agents in turn. Captain Akitaru Obi, appreciate you taking the time to train my people. We're here to learn and to integrate better with Overwatch's operational standards. Your reputation precedes you, Farah said. The captain with no powers who turned himself into a one-man army through pure determination and engineering. Impressive, Obi shrugged, but Shinra could see the pleased expression that flickered across his face. I do what needs doing, same as everyone else here. DVA gestured for them to follow. Come on, I'll give you the grand tour before we get into the boring logistic stuff. Gibraltar's amazing. You're gonna love it. Well, most of it. The showers in C Block are terrible, and the cafeteria coffee tastes like motor oil, but everything else is great. The tour was indeed grand. Gibraltar was bigger than Shinra had imagined, a warren of corridors and chambers carved into the rock itself, connected by elevators and stairs and the occasional death-defying bridge over sheer drops. VA led them through training facilities that made the Tokyo Academy look like a community gym. Holographic combat simulators capable of rendering entire battlefields. Weapons ranges with targets at distances Shinra hadn't known you could shoot accurately. A medical bay that Iris kept making appreciative sounds about. And engineering workshops that had Arthur practically vibrating with excitement. Is that a forge? Arthur asked, pressing his face against the window of what appeared to be Torbjorn Lindholm's personal workshop. Inside, genuine medieval smithing equipment sat alongside cutting-edge 3D printers and fabrication systems. An actual functional forge in a military installation? Torbjorn insists on it, DVA explained. Says some things can't be made properly with just technology. Brigitte, that's his daughter, she uses it sometimes too. They're both crusaders, like Reinhardt. You'd probably get along great. Arthur looked like he might cry from joy. The tour continued. They passed through the command center, where Winston, the actual guerrilla scientist Shinra had only heard about in stories, was deep in conversation with holographic displays showing global threat assessments. They saw the memorial hall, walls lined with photographs of fallen agents, a somber reminder of the cost of heroism. They visited the rec room, where off-duty agents were playing games, watching news broadcasts, or just decompressing. And through it all, Gibraltar's history pressed in from every direction. This was where Overwatch had stood when the Patris Act shut them down, where Winston had made the recall that brought them back together, where agents had lived and trained and planned operations that changed the world. Your quarters are in the East Wing, DVA said as they reached a residential section. Rooms are assigned by team. Company 8 gets the whole corridor. You've got individual quarters but shared common space. Mess hall is open 24 hours because nobody can agree on a sleep schedule. Training starts tomorrow at 0600, but today you're free to settle in and explore. Questions? When do we get to see Reinhardt? Arthur asked immediately. Is he here? Can we meet him? Diva's expression softened. Reinhardt's away on a mission right now, something in Germany. But he'll be back in a few days. I'm sure he'll want to meet you, Arthur. Winston mentioned you trained with him in Stuttgart. For 2 years, Arthur said proudly. He taught me everything about being a crusader. The code, the honor, the proper way to charge into battle while yelling inspirational things. That sounds very Reinhardt, Baptiste observed with amusement. After DVA left them to settle in, Company 8 claimed their quarters, a series of rooms arranged around a central common area with a kitchenette and seating. The rooms were small but functional, military standard but not uncomfortable. Shinra claimed one overlooking the Mediterranean, drawn by the view of endless water stretching to the horizon. He was unpacking his minimal belongings, mostly spare uniforms and the photograph of his family he carried everywhere, when Arthur burst into his room without knocking. Kusakabe, you have to see the Crusader memorabilia in the common area. There's a replica of Balderic von Adler's shield. Balderic von Adler, Kusakabe, the greatest Crusader who ever lived. Well, second greatest after Reinhardt, obviously, but still. I literally have no idea who that is, Shinra admitted. Arthur looked personally offended. We're fixing this immediately. Come on. The next hour was a crash course in Crusader history, delivered by Arthur with the enthusiasm of a literature professor discussing his favorite book. Shinra learned more about medieval warrior codes and their modern adaptations than he'd ever wanted to know. But watching Arthur light up while talking about his heroes, about the legacy he was trying to live up to, was worth the lecture. Tamaki joined them eventually, followed by Maki. Even Hinawa drifted in, though he claimed he was just cleaning his rifle in the common area and happened to be listening. Iris emerged from her quarters, her optical sensors brightening as she observed her team bonding. "It's good to see Joy returning," she said quietly. "London was heavy for all of us, but we cannot let one failure define us. We must learn, grow, and continue our mission." "Very zen," Maki observed. "Do all Omnics have that wisdom, or just you?" "All Omnics have wisdom," Iris replied, with what might have been a smile in her voice modulation. "But I have a theological degree, so mine comes with citations." The laughter that followed was healing in a way Shinra hadn't expected. They were still carrying London's weight, still processing the failure and the grief. But here, in this moment, they were also just people. Just soldiers, trying to find moments of lightness in a heavy world. Dinner in the main cafeteria was an experience. The space was massive, capable of seating hundreds, and currently occupied by perhaps 50 agents from various divisions and specializations. Shinra recognized some faces from the London operation, others from training videos and briefings. There was Lucio, the Brazilian DJ and freedom fighter, chatting animatedly with Mercy near the windows. Genji sat alone in a corner, his cybernetic body motionless, possibly meditating. Tracer blinked in and out of existence as she delivered messages to different tables, her chronal accelerator allowing her to be in 6 places at once. Company 8 claimed a table near the center, and within minutes, other agents began drifting over to introduce themselves. "You're the ones from Tokyo, right?" A young woman with short brown hair and omnic augmentation on her arms approached. "Echo mentioned you. Said you handled the London aftermath well despite everything. I'm Emily, Tracer's girlfriend. I work in communications and intelligence analysis." "Communications?" Hinawa perked up. "I'd like to discuss signal encryption protocols if you have time." "Oh no," Tamaki muttered. "He's found someone who speaks his language. We've lost him." Indeed, Hinawa and Emily immediately launched into a technical discussion that left everyone else at the table baffled and slightly concerned. More introductions followed. Agents whose names Shinra tried and failed to memorize, all of them curious about the Japanese division, about Company 8's specializations, about their experience in London. The attention was overwhelming, but not unwelcome. It felt like being welcomed into a family, albeit a very large and very deadly family. Baptiste appeared during dessert, carrying a tray and looking for a seat. Shinra waved him over without thinking, and the combat medic smiled and joined them. "So," Baptiste said, settling in and attacking what appeared to be chocolate pudding with the intensity of someone who'd survived on military rations too long. "How are you all really doing? After London, I mean. DVA briefed me on what happened, but briefings don't tell me about the people." "We're coping," Captain Obi said carefully. "It was a hard loss, but we're professionals. We know the job comes with failures." "Professional doesn't mean unaffected," Baptiste countered gently. "I've seen a lot of young soldiers try to just push through trauma without processing it. Usually doesn't end well." Shinra found himself speaking before his brain caught up.
"How do you process it when you do everything right and someone still dies?" Baptiste was quiet for a moment, his expression distant. "You remember that you're human, that you can't save everyone, no matter how fast you are or how skilled. And then you use that failure as fuel, not to burn yourself out, but to burn brighter, to be better next time." He looked at Shinra directly. "You're the one who tried to intercept the shot, aren't you? The one with the flame propulsion?" Shinra nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, I heard about that. You almost died trying to be a shield. That's brave. Also really stupid, but mostly brave." Baptiste's smile was kind. "Don't let that moment define you as a failure. You made a split-second decision under impossible conditions. The fact that you even attempted something that heroic, that's who you are. Hold on to that." The words settled into Shinra's chest like a warm coal, not burning but glowing, offering light in the darkness that had been pressing on him since London. "Baptiste," Arthur said carefully, clearly trying to change the subject to something less emotionally heavy. "DVA mentioned you used to work for Talon, if that's not too personal a topic." "It's fine," Baptiste interrupted. "I don't hide it. Yeah, I was Talon for about 5 years. Combat medic, field support, kept their operatives alive during missions. Thought I was doing good work. They told us we were bringing order to chaos, that Overwatch had failed, and we were the realistic solution." "What changed?" Maki asked. "I saw who I was really keeping alive," Baptiste said quietly. "What kind of operations I was supporting."
"There was a mission in Port-au-Prince, my hometown. Talon sent us to eliminate a politician who was pushing anti-corruption legislation. They called him a terrorist. He was a teacher, trying to make his city better. I watched our operatives gun him down in front of his family, and I realized I was on the wrong side." The table was silent, everyone processing the weight of that confession. "Leaving was hell," Baptiste continued. "Talon doesn't let people walk away. I had to fake my death, go underground for 2 years, eventually reached out to Overwatch through back channels. They gave me a chance to make amends. Been trying to ever since." "That's incredibly brave," Iris said softly. "Recognizing you were wrong and choosing to change. Many people never manage that." "Yeah, well, I have a lot to make up for." Baptiste's expression darkened. "Which is why I try to help young agents like you all. Try to give you the information I have, so you don't walk into situations blind like I did." Shinra saw his opening. "You mentioned you had experience with how Talon operates, their methods, their people?" "Some," Baptiste confirmed. "My information's a couple years old now. I've been out for 3 years, but the core operations haven't changed much. Why?" "The White Angel," Shinra said, keeping his voice steady. "The sniper in London. Do you know anything about them?" Baptiste's expression shifted to something complicated. Concern, recognition, wariness. "Some, not much, but more than most. The White Angel is relatively new. Started showing up in Talon operations maybe 2 years ago, right around when I was getting out. At first, it was just rumors. A teenage operative who never missed, who could predict target movements with impossible accuracy." "Teenage?" Arthur leaned forward. "How teenage?" "Reports vary, but consensus seems to be somewhere between 14 and 17. Nobody knows for sure. Talon keeps their special operatives' identities locked down tight. But the few glimpses people have gotten all describe someone young, slender, white hair, and scary competent with a sniper rifle." White hair. The single strand Shinra had found on that London rooftop felt like it was burning in his pocket, even though he'd given it to Athena for analysis. "There's more," Baptiste continued, his voice dropping slightly. "The really weird part. Word is the White Angel isn't just a sniper. In close quarters, he uses a sword. A katana, specifically. And he's supposedly just as deadly with that as he is with the rifle." Arthur's eyes widened.
A teenage sniper who's also a master swordsman? That's not normal training. That's childhood indoctrination, years of specialized instruction. Exactly, Baptiste agreed grimly, which tells you what kind of operative we're dealing with. This isn't someone who joined Talon as an adult. This is someone they've raised, someone who's never known anything else. The rumor mill calls him the White Angel, but internally, Talon uses a different designation. Shinra's heart was hammering so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. What designation? Just a name, probably a code name, Baptiste said. They call him Sho. The world stopped. Shinra heard nothing but white noise, saw nothing but Baptiste's lips forming that name. Sho, his brother's name. His 6-year-old brother who'd been lost in the Null Sector invasion, who was supposed to be dead, buried in rubble, gone forever. But they'd never found a body. Kusakabe? Arthur's voice came from very far away. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Shinra couldn't form words. His mind was racing, connecting dots he didn't want to connect, seeing patterns that couldn't possibly be real. That name, Sho, you're certain? As certain as intelligence chatter can be, Baptiste said, his concern evident. Does it mean something to you? Should he tell them? Should he admit that Sho had been his brother's name, that the timeline fit, that the white hair and the age and the name and the sword skills all painted a picture he'd been trying not to see since London? It's a common name, Shinra lied, his manic grin spreading across his face like a mask. In Japan, I knew someone called that once, long time ago. Nobody believed him. That much was clear from their expressions. But nobody pressed, and Shinra was grateful for that small mercy. Anyway, Baptiste continued, clearly deciding to move on, if you encounter the White Angel again, be careful. He's young, but he's been trained by the best killers Talon has. Don't underestimate him just because he's a kid. Some of the most dangerous people I've met in this work were the ones who started young. The conversation moved on to other topics, training schedules, Gibraltar's amenities, stories about missions and near disasters. But Shinra barely heard any of it. His mind was elsewhere, churning through implications and impossibilities. Sho could be alive. The White Angel could be his brother. His brother could be a Talon assassin. The three thoughts spiraled around each other like flames, consuming everything else in his consciousness. He needed to know, needed to confirm or deny, needed to find proof, needed to... Earth to Shinra. Tamaki's voice cut through his spiral. You okay? You've been staring at your pudding for like 5 minutes without eating it. Sorry, Shinra managed, forcing himself back to the present. Just tired. It's been a long few days. Tell me about it, Maki agreed. I vote we all get some sleep and tackle Gibraltar properly tomorrow when we're fresh. The team dispersed to their quarters, exhaustion finally catching up with everyone. Shinra went through the motions of his evening routine on autopilot. Shower, change into sleep clothes, set his alarm. But when he finally lay down in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, sleep felt impossible. Sho, his baby brother, 6 years old the last time Shinra saw him, holding their mother's hand, wide-eyed with wonder at the Overwatch Museum. If he was alive, if he'd survived the invasion, if Talon had taken him. Shinra pulled out his phone, opened the encrypted channel Athena had provided for direct communication with Overwatch intelligence, typed a message with shaking hands. Need DNA analysis results on the hair sample from London, priority request. Also need all available intel on Talon operative designation Sho, also called the White Angel. This is personal. He sent it before he could second-guess himself. Athena responded almost immediately. Request acknowledged. DNA analysis will be complete within 48 hours. Intelligence files on designated Talon operative are limited, but will be compiled and sent to your secure inbox. Are you well, Agent Kusakabe? Your biometric readings suggest elevated stress. I'm fine, Shinra typed back. Just need answers. Understood. Rest well, Agent Kusakabe. Tomorrow's training will be demanding. Shinra set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling some more. Somewhere in the world, the White Angel moved through shadows with a sniper rifle and a sword, killing on command for an organization that turned children into weapons. And if that person was Sho, if his brother had somehow survived and been twisted into this, Then Shinra would find him, would bring him home, would save him from whatever talent had made him into, even if it destroyed them both trying. Because that's what big brothers did. That's what heroes did. They saved people, especially the ones who didn't know they needed saving. Outside his window, the Mediterranean stretched dark and endless under the stars, and Gibraltar stood watch, as it had for decades, a beacon of hope in a world that constantly threatened to drown in darkness. And in a small room in the East Wing, a young hero made a promise to a brother who might not even remember him. "I'll find you, Sho, and I'll bring you home, no matter what it costs, no matter how far I have to go, because you're my brother, and I won't fail you again." The flames around his feet flickered unconsciously as he finally drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams filled with white figures and impossible shots, and a 6-year-old boy reaching for his hand in the darkness. The hunt had begun. And Shinra Kusakabe would burn down the world to save his brother, even if his brother didn't want to be saved, even if his brother had become a monster. Especially then, because that's what heroes did. They saved people, always.